If you look at people that are successful, they're not passionate. They're actually obsessive. Warren Buffett is absolutely obsessed on one thing, managing risk. So I had a client call me up. They were asking me to come in, do this event for them. And I could have just said, we're going to do this, this, and this. Done deal. I asked this question: what caused you to call me? And what I heard was a whole story that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Asking a good power question, get deliberate about the questions you're going to ask. If we can have those conversations sooner, my job gets easier because I get the phone call when there's a forest fire, like raging forest fire. And by then it's too late. And I'm like,
you're listening to the Real Business Connections Network. Real Business Connections Network. Powered by Balbert Marketing, LLC. Subscribe now and check us out at realbusinessconnections.com. Enjoy the show.
Doug Johnston, you have a headline in your book, ProBits, Stop Communicating. That caught my eye. What do you mean stop? We're communicating right now. What do you mean by stop communicating?
I think it's the misapplication of the word that is what I'm trying to challenge people to think about. When you talk with professionals about communicating, what they think is send another email, do another PowerPoint, let's get everybody in a room, do death by PowerPoint, and talk at people. I want to break that paradigm, because what we're really trying to do is what we're doing here, having a conversation, engaging with people, talking with people. So an example is, in the world of change, John Kotter is the change management guru out of Harvard. I don't know him, he doesn't know me, but he has a quote. He says, when we are in change, we under-communicate by a factor of 10. And I think that should scare the bejesus out of us. Here's why. Number one, I think we're always in change. So by definition, we're always under-communicating. But the other thing is, when people hear that, they think, oh, let's go print some T-shirts and coffee mugs and declare victory and go home and think they communicated. So what I do is I change that word and say we tend to under-socialize. And I think socialization and conversation are the two things that I like to get people thinking about. How do I socialize more effectively? How do I converse and exchange with people instead of it being one directional? How do I make it two directional or multi-directional? So that's why I had that headline in the ProBits, which is stop communicating. Start socializing, start conversing with people.
So, quick tips. How do we make it multi-directional? Well, what are some tips on how we can socialize, not just communicate, but socialize better?
So I have a client I'm working with. They're in the midst of a huge change, and the first tendency is, let's do the PowerPoint. Let's talk about all the reasons this change is so important, and that is important. Do that. What we're adding to it is the way to pivot into this is to ask questions. So keep the communication portion short. So their communication about the change and what they're trying to accomplish, 5 minutes, 8 minutes. Not the 2 hours, the lights are out and everybody's bored senseless, right? So 5 minutes or less, and then followed up with a question about, okay, now you tell us, what do you think this means to you? How does this apply to you? How does this impact your day-to-day work? What kinds of things do we need to be thinking about? So I think that two things will do that. Number one, think of good questions that get people talking. That pivots us from communicating to conversing. I think the other one is get curious, right? So instead of we think as leaders, we have to go in and we have to know and therefore tell everybody. And sometimes we're afraid because we may not know. So we tend to over communicate to try to prove that we know. Go in and get curious and say, you know what, I may not know. I don't know what this looks like from where you're coming from. I don't know what this looks like for your job, for your responsibility, for our customers. So get curious. So ask questions, get curious.
Ask questions, get curious. And one thing I think about when, we're recording a podcast together, there's a listener listening right now. It's not just you and I. If we talk, but they don't earn any value, or if they don't feel part of the conversation, we're not communicating with them. We're not conversing with them. We're missing an opportunity there. So it's not just talking at each other. It's actually communicating a point, I imagine.
Well, and not to blow sunshine at you, but that's what you're doing, is you're acting as a surrogate for the audience by asking questions and follow up and things that they might be thinking of. versus, hey, let's put Doug on camera for an hour and just have him talk. Uh, Ask my kids. It'll get boring after about 5 minutes, right? So that's why, like what we're doing here is we're trying to have a conversation that brings in that broader audience, and you're asking good questions that kind of bring things out that they might be interested in. And that's also a tip that we can use in the work environment too.
Mm.
So sometimes we go up to do a presentation, we ask some questions, but maybe we have somebody else involved in that process who's bringing questions in that the audience might be thinking of, but they're afraid to ask because they don't want to look like they don't know or they're not knowledgeable or whatever the case may be.
Well, to be that father, father. I said the word father. I meant father.
Fodder.
For myself and the listener, truly, this literally just happened. So we all have a cell phone. And I apologized when I joined this meeting because I was about 2.5 to 3 minutes late. The reason I was late is I got an email from a client. My stress level chemicals spiked. There was a concern, and I wanted to quickly respond to it, letting them know that I would solve this concern in a little bit. But suddenly my energy was off, and then I open up my laptop. I've got to close down screens. Technology, I felt coming into the conversation that I came in a little distracted and slightly late because in 2025, technology just gets in the way. And granted, I can communicate on this phone. I can open up a laptop and go on LinkedIn or email and message anybody. But is that also posing problems? Because I just explained, sometimes I feel like I'm everywhere and nowhere all at once.
So like 5 ideas are going through my head at the same time. So number one is
Yes.
electronic communication, right? Necessary, embedded, it's not going to go away. We're going to need to use the social media platforms, email, texting. Our phones are going to be there. So the first thing is it ain't going to go away because some people say, well, we didn't have to do this way back when. So, but we need to manage it differently. I think that the electronic communication that we use is exceptional for transactional information. So just like you and I setting up this call, there's a series of emails that go back and forth about when, how, what are we going to talk about? And that enables the conversation. It is not the conversation. So oftentimes I talk with young people and I'm like, so when there's a problem, one of my favorite questions, somebody says, I got this problem with this other person. My first question is, what conversations are you having with them? And they'll tell me about a conversation. So, well, tell me about when and how you have that conversation. And they say, well, I sent them an email. I'm like, no, that's not the conversation. That's communicating. You don't know what's coming through on the other side. There needs to be a process where I'm hearing and seeing what's coming from the other person. So we have to acknowledge it and manage it differently. So you were distracted when you came into the call. I didn't tell you that at one point I pulled my phone up and you probably saw my eyes glance over at my phone. And I should have told you that I just want to let you know I'm putting my phone on do not disturb. So it doesn't buzz or vibrate or whatever. You know, I think we can manage it differently. We can get the technology out of it. I have a client, they have this process. When they have team meetings, they call it hands up, eyes up. And they literally do this. Cameras up front, hands are off the keyboard. And it gets us out of this mode where people have, 2 or 3 screens and they're doing this through the call and they're not engaged. Right? If we're going to engage and people are like, well, I don't have time, I need to multitask. And one of my other little riffs as we talked about from the ProBits is stop talking about multitasking. Multitasking is bunk. It does not work. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. Absolutely. But we cannot do 2 cognitive activities at the same time. Great book on this called The Brain at Work. We are actually eroding our cognitive ability to focus. Because even this morning, I was working on a project and then I get alerts that are popping up on my screen. An email came in, a text came in, and now all of a sudden my focus is broken. So what we're doing, we're not actually multitasking. What we're doing is we're context shifting. That means that I have to ramp down from what I'm doing in order to ramp up to listen to someone else. I have to ramp down from listening to them to ramp back up to do what I'm doing. And I think that's where the electronic communications is just getting in the way. We think we're being more efficient, and we're not. We're actually becoming less efficient, and we're actually affecting our cognitive ability, and we're also affecting how we engage with other people because they see it. Like right now, we're talking eyeball to eyeball. I keep your panel up by my camera so that I'm looking at you.
Same.
If I look at one of my other screens, I'm now sending you a message that I'm not here, that I'm not engaged. If we're going to have the conversation and people say, well, how do I do that? Like, sit down and invite somebody in with them, have a conversation. Anyways, I riffed on a few different things. One more thing. Let me just add one more.
Yeah,
One of the other ProBits in there is something I call the CQ for curiosity quotient. So we know IQ, we know EQ. I have a term I use called curiosity quotient. Curiosity quotient is the number of questions that I ask, the ratio of the questions that I ask to the statements that I make. Me personally, I'm trying to improve that ratio. I say too many things. When it's better for me, going back to where we started with stop communicating, start asking, get curious, listen to other people, ask more questions. And it's a real simple way to walk out of a meeting and say, what do you think my CQ ratio was? You don't have to measure it. You don't have to put little check marks. Just ask yourself. And I walk away from meetings and do the flat forehead thing and go, I wasn't asking enough questions. Probably like right now.
No, you're perfect. You're my guest. And I have a million questions for you. One thing, I'm literally going to provide a live case study. So if someone's listening to the audio, this won't make sense. I'll walk them through it. But if you're watching the video, you'll notice that I forgot to turn on my on-air sign. And the reason I forgot to turn on my on-air sign, Doug, is because with my phone, my email, my cheat sheet of notes, excited for this interview, Ben was multitasking and he forgot little details that are part of the process of his production. So when Ben multitasks, he forgets the on-air sign. So and we're talking all sorts about ProBits. What is ProBits? So that's one of your 3 books. It's your most recent book. Talk a little bit about, because I wrote a couple of these down. We might tackle them. Time Isn't Money. Forget About Passion. We already talked about Stop Communicating and a couple more. You've got these like heavy hitter insights in this book, ProBits. Talk a little bit more about that.
Thanks for calling them heavy hitters. So my goal, my hope was, so I've written 3 books. The third one, ProBits, which is called ProBits Professional Tidbits for Work and Life. So they came from my experience. So I've been out speaking at public events as a keynote person, leading workshops, and then also facilitating strategy with clients for 23 years now. And I would be in an engagement and I would say something and I'd watch people grab a pen and start writing down furiously. And I'm like, I think I said something reasonably intelligent. I may want to remember that. And I'm not kidding, Ben. I literally, here's my 3x5s. I always have 3x5 cards around and I'd write it on the 3x5 card. So when my kids started to launch into their lives, one going to college, the other one moving away, I compiled them and I just printed them in a little book for them. And I said, here are things that your dad said, or maybe I heard, or I thought that nobody's going to teach you in a class, right? It's not going to be in a book. I want to get you thinking differently. And I put them all together for them. And the kids liked it, or at least they humored their dad and said, hey, these are kind of cool. And I had other people who saw them and said, you need to publish them. Finally, at the end of October last year, I got off my butt. I got it all published and professionally done into a book. So the book are all intended to be short, pithy, edgy ideas that get people thinking differently. That's my goal. They're short. So a lot of effort, getting it down to kind of the essence of what the message was. And there's 101 of them. And if you're like, well, I don't want to buy the book, you don't have to buy the book. By the way, just go to this website, www.theprobits.com. They're all there. You can scroll through, click on one and say, hey, that's an idea that I like. I have clients that use it for staff meetings. They're like, hey, let's talk about this one. Or sometimes I do a lot of coaching. I'll take one and I'll select it and I'll send it to somebody and say, this relates to what we were just talking about. The goal is to get people to think differently. That's why stop communicating. People, what? What do you mean stop communicating? We're supposed to communicate more. Yes. And I want to think about how we communicate differently. So that's where the auspice for this book came from. And again, it's a little bit of a different format than my others, but yeah, so I put it out there. And again, it's on the web if people want to go read it. They want the physical copy, it's on Amazon. But more importantly, I just want to get the ideas out to people.
Yeah. And we'll talk about the others. I know Thriving in Conflict. I know you're a speaker, a workshop facilitator. We'll get there in a moment, but I wrote down 3 of these. I didn't write down all 100. Is it 101 you said?
It's 101, but I didn't say that in the book. I didn't want it to be like 101 Dalmatians. I challenged myself to get to 101. So
2 more that I wrote down because I was like, what does this mean? Time isn't money? What are you talking about? Time isn't money.
So this, again, comes from the professional realm. So there's an old saying, time is money. And I'm like, no, it's not. Time is way more valuable than money. I can always make more money. I can't make more time. And what I want to challenge people to think about is I want them to still think about time like money. Where are they spending their time? So if it is my most valuable commodity, I need to protect it. Just like I protect my money by putting it in banks, maybe in the stock market, that's another story. But I want to put it in secure places where I know it's there. The same thing's true for my time. So one of the things that I encourage people to do is look at where they're spending their time. So there's lots of different ways that you can do that. But one of the things that some of my clients will do is they'll go in and actually audit their time. How much time am I spending in client engagement? How much time am I spending in administrative? How much of it is just putting out fire drills? And if I get clearer on that, then I can start reinvesting my time. I can get rid of the stuff that I don't need to do. The kitten video. Hey, did you see this kitten video? And it shows up in your email, your text, and you're like, I got to go look at that right now. And it's like, stop. Stay in the moment. Invest your time like you invest your money. Hopefully wisely. Get rid of the foo-foo frappuccinos from Starbucks. What are they, $8 a piece now? I'm like, why am I buying
it's pretty
these from Starbucks?
Yeah.
Nothing against Starbucks. Don't get me wrong. Like the company. But we waste a lot of time and a lot of money just on these senseless kind of things, where if we just got rid of them, we would be much more productive, much more effective.
This is slightly related. I'm tangenting, but what are your thoughts on Instacart or Grubhub? Because you could make the argument that to go and shop for all these items and then cook and prepare the meal, or to walk through the grocery store to get a $200 dollar cart is a great allocation of time. Well, what's your opinion on that scenario? So I thought one could argue, well, if I get a Frappalappa latte, then I'm saving time. But in theory, you could have just made coffee at home. It takes like 10 seconds. But something like cooking a meal or ordering a whole grocery list, that's time consuming, isn't it?
Yeah. I think that if we look at it as a strategic investment, you say, you know what, a friend of mine says this, I'm all about efficiency. I'm all about, I'm not going to spend my time chasing this stuff down anymore. So he's a great candidate for Grubhub. Because he's like, that's inefficient to drive to the grocery store, go pick it up, have somebody. Now, there's a cost to that. Yeah. And for some people, that cost may not be the best investment for them, right? They want to save that money and they'll go do it themselves. There's a trade-off in it. But I think we can make those decisions strategically. If I'm saving time, there's things that are convenience for me that, hey, go to town. Because now I can reinvest that time doing something else. The big one, my daughter got me turned on to HelloFresh. I don't know if you've seen this or not.
Yeah, I love it.
They send you the meal already prepared. I'm like, this is awesome. Because if I have to figure it out and go shop, I end up throwing food away. Now they're a little expensive, but it's also less expensive than what I spend ordering out. And I can prepare a meal in 30 minutes. And I'm not very smart when it comes to cooking. So it's all step by step and everything's prepared. So we don't do it every night, but it's a great time saver for us, so that when we know we have a busy week, we get a box and we've got them stacked up and we're like, tonight, this is what we're doing. We don't have to invest that time. We can take the time that we would have invested in shopping and planning and use that for other things.
I love that. This is the Rochester segment of our podcast, so I might as well mention 95 Nutrition is a place I go locally to get those pre-prepared meals. And Wednesday from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. is their quote unquote happy hour, where certain meals are significantly discounted and on sale. So I don't overthink it. I just, it's right next to where I work. So I just show up during their happy hour. I purchase whatever's discounted because it kind of narrows the decision. There's a couple I love, I buy every time anyways, but it narrows the decision-making process. I buy the ones that are on sale, it's prepared, and I keep them in the fridge at work. So at any point, if I need a meal, heat it up, good to go. So HelloFresh, all those companies do the same thing. 95 Nutrition, just a local company doing that. That's why I brought it up.
And if you saw, I'm grabbing my pen to write it down because I got to go check that out. So that's awesome. Thank you.
They do garbage plates. They do healthy garbage plates and things that I don't know how they keep it healthy.
But those are all things that if we're more conscious of it, if we're more deliberate about it, if we think of our time as a more valuable commodity than our money, then all of a sudden things start coming to us. We're like, hey, that is worth the investment of doing that. So it's a trade-off. And if we're more conscious about it, then we're going to be more efficient.
So my third and favorite pro bit that I wrote down, forget about passion. What? What do you talk about?
You know, it's funny. We tell this to our people. We're like, you need to be passionate about blah, blah, blah. Like, we're going to go divine it from someplace. Like, where's the passion closet? And I'm going to go to the passion closet and I'm going to pull out passion and go do it.
Yeah.
I think, of course, there's passion. But if you look at people that are successful, they're not passionate. They're actually obsessive. I'll share with you a couple of examples. So I read one of Warren Buffett's book. Warren Buffett is absolutely obsessed on one thing, by the way, and it's on risk taking. It's on managing risk. That's why he goes off, and there's stories about him. He goes to a party and he gets bored and he goes off to his office and starts reading 10Ks. Who does that, right? But he's obsessing over that. His mind can't think of anything else. The Wright brothers, right? I just finished their book last year on the Wright brothers. These are guys that had no business starting the origin of flight, but they were obsessive of how many different wings did they create in order to find one that gave them the right lift. Obsessive. It's at the expense of everything else around them. Now, I'm not saying that we should do that, but I think if we want to equate passion from some of these leaders as what their fuel is actually obsession. So how does that apply to us? I don't go to parties and then go read 10Ks, and I don't sit out on the banks in North Carolina carving out wings to figure out how to get lift. But the thing that we can think about is, what does our mind work on when it's not encumbered with anything else? When you wake up in the middle of the night, it's driving. When I'm driving, that's when my mind tends to flow. What does it work on?
Let me say, like,
what I found is, if you ever notice my tagline, I'm not trying to do this as a promo, but it comes from that thought process. My tagline says, helping professionals and organizations engineer better conversation. That's what my mind works on. How can we do that? How can we get better conversations about strategy? How can we have better conversations about development, about delegation, about conflict, about any number of topics? And I'm always thinking about it. When I have time to read something that's not joy reading, that's work reading, that's what I go to. I think all of us can answer that question. What does your mind work on when it's free of everything else? That points us. That's the difference between passion, like go get passionate about something. You need to be passionate about the company and what we do. No, I want to know what is on that borderline of obsession for you. Like, what do you think about? What do you like to work on? Anyways, I don't know if that makes sense or helps at all.
Yeah, it does. One thing that's going through my mind, and I've been trying to determine my word, but it was Roger Wakefield who said on this podcast, if you can't explain what you do in one word, YouTube has no clue what you do. And if you type in the word plumber or plumbing, Roger Wakefield plumbing education comes up first on YouTube, which is unbelievable. Of all the contractors, he comes up first. You mentioned Buffett. His word might be risk.
Yeah.
Brene Brown, who I've been studying, her word might be shame.
Or
Your word or vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I could do this all day. It's kind of having fun, but your word, possibly because you've written thriving in conflict, is your word communication? Is it conflict? Is that your word, conflict?
Conflict, but I think more importantly, because how do we manage conflict? We manage it through conversation.
Mm,
Most people, when they hear that title, the second book, Thriving in Conflict, they think I'm going to go tell them how to tell people off, right?
yeah.
But I think that if we look at conflict, so I'm just going to riff on that for a minute. If we recognize that we are in conflict all the time, from the minute we wake up in the morning to the minute, there's always conflicts around us somewhere. And conflict is good, right? It can help propel us forward because it could be a conflict with what we're doing today versus what the markets are demanding of us. It could be conflict over an employee who we hired who we thought could do A, and we find out that they can't do A, they're really good at C. Conflict to me, so I redefined it, by the way. So in the book, the first thing I did is I said, let's define conflict differently because conflict, if you look at Merriam-Webster, there's a lot of inflammatory words like oppositional, disagreement, whatever. I think conflict is easier than that. Conflict to me is a gap. It's a gap between what we expect and what we experience.
Mm.
And then there's more to the definition that can lead to deeper understanding and better results. If we look at conflict as a gap, then we need to get better at seeing the gap and then talking about it. And if we see conflict instead of, people come in and they complain about someone, right? They think that's conflict. That's not the conflict part. We need to look at what's the gap and work on that together. Because it could be, the person who isn't performing in their job. I expected them to be able to do this and they cannot. Now I get to have a conversation with them about what is it that they really want to do? Because they know that they're not a fit, right? That this job isn't a fit for them, but we can help them find something here or somewhere else that's going to be a better fit for them. So now we can have a conversation instead of saying that person isn't on board, they're not capable, they're stupid, they're lazy, whatever those words are. Generally, that's not the case. So it moves us away from blaming people to looking at where the gaps are and then having a conversation about it. So the long answer to your question is, would it be conflict or conversation? It would be both. Maybe there's a little mnemonic in there, conflict, conversation. I don't use communication. I've just tried to take that language out of me, out of my vocabulary, because when I use it, then I get people who are writing memos in PowerPoint. And I'm like, stop the madness.
So tell me if this is oversimplifying, but conversation is what bridges the gap between the 2 points causing the conflict.
Right on. See,
So
now I can retire and you can take over, Ben, and you can go, or anybody listening, because it is, like I said in the example, when people say they have a problem, my first question is, what conversations are you having? Usually what I find out is none. Or if they're having them, they're doing it through email, and that just doesn't work, right? So the first step, people think, I have a feedback model. Like, how do I give feedback to people? So I have a very simple framework on how to do that. But I don't want to have to run around and give them feedback. If I'm having conversations with them along the way and seeing the gaps when they occur, we can be having really robust conversations about that before we end up at a point where we've got to give feedback and we have to confront somebody. So how do we do that? And I think that's where the value is to us in organizations. One more quote, by the way, if I can riff for a minute. There's a series on Netflix called Formula One Drive to Survive. I don't know if you've seen it or not.
I
am not a racer. I'm not a formula guy. But I watched it. It's really a great series. I think they're in their 5th season. And the 800-pound gorilla in the formula world has been Mercedes until recently when Red Bull knocked them off their pedestal. But they were interviewing the team principal, the guy that has ownership and basically runs the team. His name is Toto Wolff. Love that name, by the way. I want to change my name to Total Wolf because I think it's like so cool. He's a German.
That is real name.
It's his real name. Well, Toto is
Fantastic name.
like an abbreviation for, I can't remember what it is, but I did look
Longer.
it up because I'm like, is Toto his name?
Yeah.
So they were asking him to what does he attribute his success? And he said, we have a culture here where we blame the problem, not the person. And that's what we're talking about here, right? Which is let's look and talk about where the gap is, not the person. Where we go in conflict is we go to the person. Ask somebody about a conflict they have. The first thing that'll come out of their mouth is someone's name. That's how we start to shift. How we start to, as I say in the book, thrive in conflict. If we start looking at it differently and look at it as an opportunity to kind of close those gaps that we have.
So let's talk about proactive and reactive. We'll start with reactive because it's a little spicier. You can give an example that's happened, or we can kind of do a hypothetical scenario. It's up to you. But what would be an example of we're being reactive? It's a little late to the game to have this conversation. Possibly you never came in, did a workshop. There might be some struggles in leadership. What's a reactive example of yikes? We probably should have had conversations and had a little bit more of a plan, but now we got to do the best we can.
Let me pick two scenarios.
Sure.
One is somebody goes in to do a client presentation and they blow it. Right? So nobody goes in to do a bad job. They're trying to do a good job. What did we miss along the way? I think the first conversation is with myself. What did we miss? Right? Was I rushing through this? Did I not provide enough direction or enough support or enough training? Did I, just dump it on them? So that's kind of the first one. The second is I use this example. Instead of thinking about giving feedback, what I want to do is help people more accurately self-assess. Instead of going to that person and telling them how they screwed up the presentation, what I want to do is ask them, how do you think it went? And I'd like to start with what they think they did well. And I want them to focus there first, because what happens is most people, you ask them what they did well, they're going to tell you what they did wrong. And I want them to see what they did well so that they repeat it. And I probably didn't see what they did well because I was focused on what they didn't do well. So I start with that question. Remember, conversation starts with a question. What do you think you did well? Focus there, get them to be specific. Then transition over and don't ask them, what did you do wrong? I borrowed this term from somebody else. I don't know where it came from, but I love it. It's what would have made it even better? I use EBI, even better if. Because what I might find out is they didn't do a good job because their numbers were wrong. The budget numbers they presented were incorrect. If I ask what would have made it even better, I might find out that I didn't get the finance numbers till the night before. And I didn't have a chance to proof the numbers. Or I might find out that they're not good at catching their own mistakes. By the way, that's my problem. People are like, oh, there was an error in a document. I'm like, yeah, I just can't see it. Now I'm having a whole different conversation than coming up to them and say, you really blew that one. Let me tell you what you did wrong. So the first, how do we get ahead of that and reacting to it as we build that into our ongoing conversations? From the time somebody comes on board, I should be asking them questions with, how's your onboarding process going? How am I doing in terms of giving you the information and direction that you need to do your job? How are you doing performing the work that you wanted to do? So have those conversations, get out ahead of it. I use a forest fire analogy, right? The fires we saw in Los Angeles did not happen magically. They didn't erupt. Fortunately, they erupted quickly.
Yeah.
What happens is it starts with a spark, right? And then we get smoke. Then we have flames. Then we have raging forest fires. Let's see the sparks when they occur. What happens is we ignore them. I knew that person who was going to blow the presentation probably wasn't going to do a good job because it wasn't something they were comfortable with. I may not have given them enough direction. So let's address the spark before it happens. So that's one example. The other one is, true examples, by the way. The second one is somebody who blew up on somebody in a meeting. And And we're like, well, where'd that come from? And when I hear it, because I get a phone call and they're like, can you believe this happened? And I'm like, yep, because it does.
Yes.
And that behavior didn't magically appear. That's been going on.
Mm.
Nobody's talked about it before. They know something's not right. They wait for it to escalate. Now it becomes the raging forest fire.
Right.
So I think the way that we can get ahead of it and be proactive is to start having conversations with people. Somebody comes out of a meeting and they're frustrated and they react negatively to somebody. Why not ask, can you tell me what was going on with you?
Mm.
Just want to understand what happened. What do you think the impact was with the client, with the other employees when they were in that meeting? Where's that come from for you? What's that about for you? If we can have those conversations sooner rather than waiting for them to escalate into the forest fire, my job gets easier because I get the phone call when there's a forest fire and a like raging forest fire. And by then it's too late. And I'm like, yeah, it's not much I can do at this point. Got to let it burn itself out, which oftentimes means getting rid of somebody. And that's just painful to watch.
Can only imagine. You can put in an action plan so another forest fire doesn't occur, but it might be too late on the current forest fire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do a integration assignment. And what I mean by integration assignment is I don't want this conversation just to be shelf help, something that you put off, it gets dusty, you don't implement anything. I want to integrate it into our lives. So if I actually am, and I'm sure the listener is thinking like, how can I be more proactive starting today where the forest fire never occurs in my team member relationships, client relationships? What's a simple task that they can start as early as today? And this might be rehashing old concepts because I know you've given like 11 of them, but what's a simple thing we can do immediately to be proactive that the forest fire doesn't ever occur?
Yeah, I think it is a little bit of a rehash, but let me package it up in a way that people can walk away and say, okay, that gives me at least a framework on how to think about it.
I want them to literally like be able to take a pen and paper and write a couple things down and have that framework.
Right. Let me rehash the two things. Curiosity quotient, communication, right? Start having the conversation, start getting curious, start asking more questions. Because you said, hey, how can we do that? It's like, start with a question. And that sounds easy. I think it's hard to think about. I call them power questions. So I had a client call me up. They were asking me to come in, do this event for them. And it was easy for me, Ben. I could have just said, we're going to do this, this, and this, done deal. But I didn't. I asked this question: what caused you to call me? And what I heard was a whole story that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Asking a good power question. Get deliberate about the questions you're going to ask. Don't let's stop asking how you doing, what's going on. Stop with the feature benefit type conversations and start asking questions and listening. I'm not shilling books. I just want to be clear. I just want to give you a concept from the book. So in Thriving in Conflict, I created a very simple 3-piece framework that people can use in any conversation. It is not linear. Do this, then do this, then do this. I want to think about how do I get better at the 3 parts of any conversation. There are 3 pieces. So if you want to write it down, I call it the idea model, which is a mnemonic, 3 parts, 4 letters. ID, which stands for identify. E is explore. A is act. If I want to get better at engaging people, I want to try to get better at my identify questions. I have some favorite ones that I like to ask, like I used with a client. What caused you to call me? But a lot of times I'm like, what's the most important and pressing thing that you want to talk about today? Right? Ask, listen. People will tell you. Take your time and don't hijack the agenda, which is my tendency. They say, I want to talk about this. I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Let me tell you what I think about that. And then it's all about me. Right?
Sure.
So how do I get better to identify, have good opening power questions? I work with auditors, right? So they have to go into the business units and they're using this framework and they want to ask the business unit a good power question when they start. For example, what's your experience been with the audit process in the past? What do you want to take away from this process for you? What are you most concerned about? Because getting audited isn't a fun day for a business unit. So how do you do that? Don't go in and tell them how great the audit is and how easy you're going to make it for them. Ask good questions to start.
Mm.
The second is the explore. Get curious. I can't tell you what questions to ask, but it's like pulling a thread. Somebody says something that if I'm curious, the next question comes to me, like you're doing in your podcast, because I've listened to you and I'm like, hey, he's really good because he hears something and then he pulls the thread and then he pulls it a little more. And I think we need to get curious. And there's a framework to help with the explore part because there's different kinds of questions we can ask, but just get curious. That's one of the ProBits is ask first. This is my hardest one. I wrote it for me. Ask first, listen second, speak last. Because what I do is I don't ask, I just start speaking, or I ask and then I start talking. So that's a reminder. It's a cue to me to ask a question, listen, and keep asking. Loop through that as much as you can. And then the last part is make sure we're clear about what action is going to come from the conversation. That's the act part. Don't just say, well, I guess I need to go talk to the client about this. Great. How are you going to talk to the client? When are you going to talk to the client? What do you need to get prepared to talk to the client? What are you most concerned about? Get them to really see and envision the action they're going to take. So if you're to say, what can they take away from it? Just think about what stage am I in a conversation? Am I identifying? What questions can I ask? Am I exploring? Am I working on action? And don't think of it linear. There's days when I'm trying to get better at explore. There's days I'm trying to get better at action. That just gives me a framework to start building my questioning skills and my curiosity into my conversation. How'd I do with that? Was that helpful and did it make sense?
It did. Identify, explore, act.
Correct.
I have imagery here. It is slightly linear, but I want you to hear this and maybe run with it. And I won't go in a super long story because I could riff on this for a day. When I was a kid in elementary school, we had a stoplight in the cafeteria.
Mm-hmm.
On the red, it said stop. On the yellow, it said think. On the green, it said act. Stop, think, act. And I'm thinking identify, explore, act. You do. This is a linear in the way I'm describing it, but you do want to stop for a moment to identify the context, the people, the situation at hand. Then you explore, you slowly explore the possibility. You ask strong questions, and then you make a decision to act.
Mm-hmm. So I'm good with that. The reason that I differentiate it and say I don't want it to be linear is because so many conversational frameworks are very linear. Do this, do this, do this, and then magic pops out the other end. And it doesn't work that way. Conversations are messy, right? And we need to be able to live with that discomfort, to live with the messiness. So the graphic, I wish I could say I designed it, but a designer created it for me, is actually 3 loops. So think of it as a loop, and there's an identify loop, which then has a connector into the explore loop, and that's a loop. And then there's a connector into the action loop, and there's a loop there. And one of the things that's interesting, Ben, there's times I've been in conversations and we're all the way at act, and I'm asking questions about next step, and I realize we're not talking about the right thing, and we have to go all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is for people that are in meetings are like, well, it's not, if it's somebody else's meeting, how does this apply here? What I want people to do is to get better at asking good, curious questions, both in the explore mode. This is why I say you could be working on explore when you have a staff meeting because you want to start asking more questions, find ways to ask them, right? And then the same thing, if I'm in a meeting, how many of them are just a waste of time? Nothing's going to happen. I'll take over your meeting, by the way. So I'll watch the clock, and 10 minutes before the clock is going to expire, I try to pivot into an action question. What are we willing to commit to from this conversation? Right? So it's a mindset. It's a framework. That's why I use the term frame, because too often people are like, well, tell me what to do, A, B, C, and D. And it's just not that simple. It's more, as you know, from your podcasting, it's like you're going to pick up on something and then you're going to pull on that thread, right? And just keep pulling and tugging.
Well, and for example, this is me bragging, but I was just in Cancun, was beautiful there. If someone was drowning, I would want the lifeguard to act immediately. I don't necessarily need them to look at the gender or the weight or how deep they are or why they broke the rule and went in a non-swimming area, you want them to act
Jump in.
immediately.
Yeah.
So we turn on different phases based on what's necessary in the scenario.
I use the example of the burning building, right? Building's on fire. You're going directive. This is what we need to do. We get people out to safety.
Yeah.
Afterwards, there should be a debrief process that says, what did we miss? Right? And then that should lead to something that says, what are we going to do differently next time? Yeah. So absolutely. There's times when you look and you're like, I just need to act. And it's the same thing in our personal life. It's like, we don't have time to process. It's something that has to be done today. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think right on.
So we've missed a lot because you've written 3 books, you've done countless keynotes, workshops, but how do we learn more about Doug and really just keep you in our world?
So appreciate you asking. Some people want to vote me out of their world. So let's be fair. My kids, will vote Dad off.
I don't know if they have that card to do that.
My kids are great. They're wonderful. But I think probably a couple things. One is on the website, if you go to my website, Impact for Results. So impact, the word impact, the number 4 word results.com. There's things in there. So there's topics that I talk about. You want to explore them a little bit. If you want to I call them jam sessions. Somebody's like, I really like that idea. Can we just do a jam session? I just schedule calls. I do it quite a bit. I give a lot of things away. I just say, hey, here's how I think about it, because I think good things come back when you do that. Right. On the back of the book, ProBits, I said, I think it was Ralph Waldo Emerson's quote. He said, a mind once stretched will not return to its original form. So my goal is to help stretch people's minds, mine included. So if people want to know more, I welcome an email. Check out the website. You can check out the social media part. I don't do podcasts like this. Haven't been doing a lot of them. Probably should be doing more. It'd be a good thing for you to pitch me on, Ben. So there's a couple of videos that are on the website that just give you a flavor for what I do. But I welcome a conversation anytime.
And in the description, in the notes, everything's clickable, good to go. You can open up a new tab. I don't want anyone to log off just yet, but that's all in the notes. I think a fun way to end it is a choose your own adventure. What's a pro bit that we didn't talk about? What's coming to your mind that you think would add value to the listener?
Play politics.
Play politics?
Play politics.
I don't want to play politics. All these are pissing me off, Doug.
We don't, right? And isn't that the thing, is that I go into companies and they're like, we're so political. But I want to shift people's thinking around it. So I'm going to get philosophical because I'm not a philosophy guy. But Aristotle said that politics is nothing more than the vehicle we created when we came together to live in community from when we were nomads so that we could negotiate our wants and needs. We need to play politics. We need to negotiate. We need to influence other people. It's a necessary and important part of what we do. Now, there's good politics and there's bad politics. Most people reference bad politics, the stuff that goes on inside of companies, things that we might see in the broader world. But good politics, the difference between them, and I'll leave you with this. Good politics is when we're advocating for the betterment of others in the world at large. Bad politics are when I'm doing it for self-service reasons, and I am also doing it at the expense of other people. So I just tell people, and that's what I end on that pro bit with, is just go play good politics. You have to do it.
Doug Johnston, thanks for coming on the show. Info is in the show notes. I'm gonna read the books. I'm gonna subscribe. I'm gonna do all the things. And if this was valuable, let me know. Let Doug know, and we'll have you back.
Awesome. I appreciate it. You did a great job, and I really appreciate you making it easy on me. So thank you for just a great conversation. I could do this for hours, and I really appreciate your skill here.
Yes, sir. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.